we didn't pray at the beginning of the other one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Father,
We did that. Go ahead.
Father, I just want to thank you for a chance to be here with Eric and everybody's celebrating Passover yesterday and today. Today's the 28th. Some people are starting unleavened bread today. Some people starting it tomorrow. Eric and I already did it. Maybe Eric's doing it again. I don't know. Father, that we would take all this time to remember your words and start doing your things, even outside in the nations, Father. I just thank you. I thank you for waking us up. Just let us continue to search in this Mishkan pattern and how it works in tandem with your letters, your alphabet. Thank you for Eric having the knowledge to teach us. In Yahushua's name I pray. Amen. And with that, I'm going to shut off my camera and let you go.
Okay, so another interesting thing, I was talking a moment ago about the word eretz, earth, spelled Aleph Resh Zadi. And just so you know, the letter Zadi didn't make it into Greek or English. So the phonetics of the letter Zadi, which I write with a capital T and then a lowercase z, because if I wrote capital T and capital Z, you might think it was Tav Zion. So if I write capital T lower z, that's Zadi. The English phonetics of trying to say any word with a Zadi in it sometimes is pronounced as TZ or TS or ST or even TH perhaps. So the phonetics have to be plugged in with something. But like, for example, Yeshua, the Greeks don't have an SH sound. So they just made it Isu. But then Greek masculine singular has a US ending, like Claudius, Maximus, same as Latin, Roman. So they added the US, so his name became Isus, because there's no SH. It couldn't be Yeshua. So the same thing with the Zadi. If there's no TZ sound, they'll replace it with something else. So the word earth, who named it earth? Earth, RTH, or EARTH. It comes from the word eretz, which Yahuwah named it in Genesis 1, verse 1. Shemayim is translated to heavens. Again, we were saying last video there was, it means to assign place, name, and sense. But we call it heaven in English. But then the word eretz is Aleph Resh Zadi. But the word eretz, simply meaning land or earth, the Aleph could be read as the prefix letter that means I am or I will, which is first person, self-referential with intent to do something. And then the word Resh Zadi pronounced rats, rats, just like in English, R-A-T-S, it means that which runs. So to run a course, a quarter-mile sprinter runs a quarter mile. So he's a runner, a rats, who runs the rats of the particular distance and course that he determines. To run the 50-yard dash, you run 50 yards. To run a 30-mile marathon, you run 30 miles. That's the rats that the rats is ratsing. In Hebrew, it's kind of all the same word. The runner is running the run. In English, we do the same thing. So to desire, to volunteer, to run, pleasing and acceptable, it's all derivatives of Resh Zadi, rats. Then you put other suffix letters on. Ratzon is serious. Resh Zadi noon. And because this is Pesach, it's just interesting to note that Resh Zadi ayin means pierced and whipped, both of which happened to Yeshua on this very afternoon a couple thousand years ago. Resh Zadi Mem means pressed and flattened. Well, he wasn't pressed and flattened. They kind of metaphorically stomped him, threw him in the grave dead. flattened out, you might say, that's resh zadi mem. But the matzah being striped and pierced and pressed and flattened is a picture spelled in the words resh zadi ayin, resh zadi mem. Resh zadi hey means to count, enumerate, or pay off, to appease or make desirable. It's like making your last house payment, taking out a loan on a vehicle and making the last one so now it's yours free and clear. Or to have your sins paid for. But that's basically the same meaning of the word memnun, where we get the word manna or mene or shemen, the word for oil, shin memnun. So the word shemen, which is oil, also the number 8 that we started talking about a moment ago, means to evaluate, to appraise, to determine something's worth. How much is this house worth that we want to put on the market? How much is this hamburger worth that we want to sell in the cafe? What are its features? What are the details? To be able to look at something piece by piece, aspect by aspect, compare it to everything else, that's the meaning of the word Eric, ayin resh kaf, and the meaning of the word shemen, shin mem nun, and then mem nun hey, same meaning. And the word resh zadi hey, ratzah. To build the universe out of the alphabet, the 22 alphabet letters, plays into the meaning of the verse of John 1:1, which also starts with the exact same word, Bereshit. In the beginning was the word. What word? I believe it was the alphabet, 22-letter Hebrew alphabet. And all things were created through the will, the desire of Elohim projected through this alphabet, making the physical universe, so that everything that exists, the seen, the unseen, that which has corporeal matter and substance, 3 dimensions, or whether it's another dimension with life and another dimension fit into time such that there's this chronological order, the past, present, future. It's all a projection of this 22-letter Hebrew alphabet. So that means we can look at the Hebrew alphabet and see in it a map somehow of everything that exists, including time, including demons and angels, which they're not necessarily constrained by time, but they certainly mess with people who are. So they're outside of time, but interface with time. But then who regulates them? Why is the occult thought of as the people who mess with sorcery and witchcraft? Occult doesn't mean sorcery and witchcraft, but the word occult, O-C-C-U-L-T, is related to the word ocular, O-C-C-U-L-A-R, having to do with the eyeball. Occlusion, O-C-C-L-U-S-I-O-N, means blocked. You can't see it. It's been occluded. Why does it have to do with the eyeball? Because the letter ayin, typically spelled A-Y-I-N, if the English letters, is the 16th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. I spell it O-Y-I-N because it lines up with our letter O in English, which is the eyeball. Drawn O like an eyeball, like the round Mishkan. Sometimes people drew it with a dot in the middle, like the pupil of the eye, or the seed in the middle of the fruit. Sometimes you draw it with a stem on the fruit, or like the part of the eye that comes back, make it more of an oval almond shape. And sometimes you don't, because there's different ways that people drew it, hieroglyphically. But I write the word oyin with an oyin, not because it's pronounced oyin. People just say ayin, but it's more like actually a guttural GH, chayin, Chayin, not heavy, not like chet, but soft guttural. Chayin. That's the way the ayin's pronounced. But then that would line up with the occult world of that which is not necessarily visible with the human eye because it's in a different dimension, like radio waves. You could say radio waves are occult. They certainly exist, but you can't see them. They exist in a different dimension of this universe. They're still subject to time and place, so they're still subject to three dimensions, but not visible. What I'm saying is that we're gonna show how all this stuff fits the Mishkan. When you start laying through words, the same way I just did with Resh Zadi. An interesting thing, if you look at Resh Zadi Dalet, it means leaped, skipped, jumped. That's like giddy. That's like a little kid goat. That's where you get the word capricious, like the General Motors car called the Caprice, made by Chevrolet. That's like the constellation Capricorn. What's that mean? It's an attitude of happy to jump about, but it also means to lie in wait or watch stealthily, like somebody watch, like a. Why are these ideas wrapped into the language? Resh Zadi Pei, that's where I was going with that. We're looking at Resh Zadi with a different suffix. Resh Zadi Dalet, leap, skipped, giddy. Resh Zadi Pei is a burning coal. What does the burning coal have to do with Resh Zadi? We're looking at the word earth, Aleph Resh Zadi, or Retz, and ending up with a burning coal, Resh Zadi Pei. Well, Pei is a mouth. And suddenly my mind goes, wait a second. Was it Jeremiah that was told, he was shown in this some kind of this vision from Elohim, and an angel came and took these tongs from a fireplace and took a burning coal and stuck it in his mouth? There was another where he had a scroll that he was told to cut up and eat, and it was sweet as honey in his mouth, but when it went into his gut, it made him sick. Talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. But anyway, what I'm saying is that as you're reading these letters, besides reading the value of the letter, the pictures the words make are triggers, are clues, which reference you back to different parables and different Bible stories. And I believe that the entire scripture is built that way on purpose. It's a type of code. There's a group called Aleph Beta. It's a, you might say it's a ministry or a business of Rabbi David Fohrman, Fohrman. Guy's a rabbi, but he has wonderful teachings. He's showing you that when you read in Hebrew, in Jeremiah 31, I think it is, it says there was Rachel weeping for her children. And there's two words, Yod Shin, and then Shin Kaf Resh. Okay, well, that means there's a payment. But he says that has to do with the name of the child born to Leah named Issachar. Well, you put those two words together and it's Issachar. And Leah said, oh, now I will get my due, I get reimbursement. So he said, you have to go back to the birth of Issachar in Genesis to understand why it talks about Rachel weeping for her children in Jeremiah 31. Well, that Jeremiah 31 has to do with the restoration of the covenant and all this stuff playing into this very study. And it may seem like I'm jumping around, but just like the Erectology class letter bet, where I said it's the scriptures are built like a banyan tree. Might want to put up a picture of a banyan tree. They have them in Hawaii, they have them in India and Indonesia, Philippines, different places in the tropics. You can't tell that it could fill up a city block, one tree. the roots are connected to the branches, and you can't tell how in the world that happened. If a root comes out and a branch goes out this way, how does something drop down and connect and form what looks like a forest of trunks? But that's the way this language works. If you remember the stories, the parables that Yeshua used, they're all tied into other things. Everything's connected in this really complex and interesting way. But I believe this Mishkan pattern is at the heart of it. There's the word for burning coal, resh zadi pei. Remember, resh zadi, if it has to do with the course to run of the Messiah coming out of the Father's house in Genesis 1, that would be mapped to the names and places of the stars, which is a whole other study that we're trying to put together, the Mazarot, the constellations. But also it has to do with resh zadi pei, burning coal. Why did he put a burning coal in his mouth? That same exact word means paving stones, or to make continuous, or a puzzle pattern inlay, fitted, joined closely, or make continuous like you can't stop. Well, that's a circle pattern. This is going back to say, well, when we said that Hebrew is a circular pattern and that Greek is a linear pattern, this is one place it shows up. So a circle of paving stones. All the letters fit together like a puzzle. So I was working on that. I'll make something of that later. But how do you make all the letters fit together like a puzzle pattern? That's just a sketch. Where they mean something based on what every letter means, such that each letter can only fit the other letter. And if you had this as a puzzle, with each one of the pieces, one of the letters, you realize this has to fit this. And if you know the meaning of the letter, it can only be this next letter, which can only then fit next to this next letter. And it's a circle, and it's a spread out like a plate, which is also the meaning of the word rakia, which is firmament. Whether it's a dome or whether it's flat, doesn't matter. It's this stretched out, made thin, which is the word zadi, pei, chet. So here I went from Aleph resh zadi to zadi resh pei to zadi resh zadi pei to zadi pei dalet, zadi pei chet, zadi pei noon, hidden code, zadi pei resh vav noon. Well, that's the word capricious again. It's going back, the branch hit the root and was going back up to the branch. And then zadi pei resh dalet ayin, zafarda is the word for frog. Why am I bringing in the idea of a frog? Zafar, zephyr, zadi pei vav resh, bubble, pupil of the eye. Just like Androhoy's Mishkan, round Mishkan. Chirping bird, but also greatest treasure, the pupil of your eye. Zadi pei yod resh hey, zafira, that which enriches, convenient time, morning, when birds chirp in the morning. Zadi pei yod resh, leaping he-goat, like a giddy kid. Braided chaplet, wreath, diadem, like a crown. Zadi pei resh, to turn or encircle. So what I'm trying to show you is that there's something about putting all these letters together in a circle, fit together, that looks like an eyeball, that has to do with ocular, in the realm of the occult, the invisible, neither good nor bad, it's just another dimension. That's what the ayin is about. And the word frog, zafarda, zadi pei resh dalet ayin, literally, zephyr is the sound of chirping or twittering of birds in the morning, and the word dalet ayin is knowledge, secret, encoded, hidden knowledge, a cipher. That's the meaning of the word frog. And when you hear frogs chirping or croaking, ribbit, ribbit, maybe you don't know what it means. Well, they know what it means. You know, they're looking for a mate or whatever there it is frogs are really doing in their world. But the word Zapharda means encrypted knowledge, were the letters that Yahweh gave us when they're put into this circle like a crown of thorns on Yeshua's head. What does that mean? It goes back to the word Bereshit, that in the very beginning, he created the whole universe, that everything fits together like a puzzle, and even every star named and placed exactly, and every letter named and placed exactly, all fits the pattern. In the Dalet, the door to the Ayin, the door to understanding. Well, Yeshua said, I'm the door. Nobody enters my Father's house except through me. So in the word Bereshit, you've got the letter Resh standing right in front of the door to the Father's house. So anybody that refuses to acknowledge Yeshua as Mashiach, Messiah. But what does the word Mashiach mean? Again, mem as a prefix means the place or the one who does the job of. Shin Yod Het means to swim. Swim? I thought he was running. Well, maybe this is not just a running race, but a swimming race. Shin Yod Het also means conversation and communication. So he's the master of the communication. He's the one who sets the pace of the communication. And if the communication is these 22 letters, then comprehending who is Yeshua, what did he come to do? What did he say? And if he only said what he heard his Father saying, then if you change his words, you'll lose the code. You'll miss out. You won't see the pattern. And so for the Jews not to acknowledge Yeshua because he was turned into Jesus the Christ, who has profaned and vilified the Torah and done away with all the festivals, the Moedim, and given us Christmas, Easter, and Sunday instead, then they'll never see this. And for the Christians to have Christmas, Easter, and Sunday instead of Leviticus 23, the seventh-day Sabbath, Yom HaShabbat, and the 7 Moedim, starting off with Pesach, which is right now, or 2 weeks ago on a different calendar, or 2 weeks hence on another calendar. It's like, regardless of the calendar, it's the idea of regarding Pesach, and then the 7 days of unleavened bread, because it's a code. The festivals are the code which locks in the meaning of the alphabet. If you're not willing to acknowledge the Sabbath day or Yeshua, it's all lost. The key of the Greek locked up the secret treasure of Yahweh's words, not only his words, but his identity. Not only his identity, but what it means to be his people, the pupil of his eye, the dearest treasure of his heart, is completely lost until now. So this is the finding. I'm going to mention one other thing, and then we're going to get right into the pattern per se itself. Paul Bari requested we look at Exodus 23:21. And what it says is, Yahweh says, I'm going to send an angel who's going to go before you. This is the English paraphrase. I'm going to send an angel to go before you, and you better listen to him and do what he says. If you make him angry, you guys are in big trouble. He's going to kill you. Better just do what he says. And if you do what he says, then I will be an enemy to your enemies, and I will do everything. I will favor you. I will do everything I said I was going to do. In fact, this is such a fantastic verse. I'm going to read it. Exodus 23:21 and the verses following. Listen to this promise. Verse 20, behold, I send an angel before you to protect you on the way and to bring you to the place I've made ready. Here's the concept. Yahuwah has messed with the history of the land back then, the land of the Canaanites. Yahweh arranged all their circumstances, the weather, their wars, their politics, their finances, how the agriculture was doing that season and 5 years before, and whether there was a virus that ran through or some kind of plague that wiped out half their military. Similarly, what happened when the Europeans were discovering and invading and taking over North America and South America. A plague had gone through and decimated the military forces of Plains Indians just a year or two before. It would have been a whole different thing if that hadn't happened. Yahweh has prepared the way to bring the people of Israel in, and they were afraid and retracted and shriveled and went back, and another 40 years passed of them dying in the wilderness that they didn't have to do. And this is before that. But here, verse 21, beware of him, it says, this angel, hearken to his voice. That's the word Shema and Shamar. Do not rebel against him. Well, the word al-tamar, do not, it's translated, do not rebel. But that word tamar or tamara means palm tree. But it also means substitution, exchange, risen, upright, erect, high rise, smoke signal is where you get the word for bitterness, signpost, and a roadside billboard. It means noticeable, look attentively. So you could say two ways to read this. You better look attentively to this malach, and we'll talk about that word in a moment, and do not rebel. Do not substitute or exchange. Well, wait a minute. We had Sunday substituted for the Sabbath day, and we had Christmas and Easter substituted for the 7 Moedim. The reason why we're making a big deal constantly, again and again, about the Christian church willingly going along with the substitution is because it defies and breaks everything Yahweh said for Israel to do. And for the church to say, well, we're replaced. We've replaced Israel. That's a substitution. He said, don't substitute. Don't be bitter. And Constantine implemented the law, the imperial decree that the Christian empire of Rome would have nothing to do with the detestable practices of the Jews. That's an exact quote in English from the Latin that Constantine laid out, which people still have record of. It's history. It betrays this verse of Exodus 23, verse 20, 21. Beware of him, hearken to his voice. Do not substitute or exchange or rebel against him, for he will not forgive your willful sin. Who's he? What does it mean to forgive? Is it this angel? Is this angel empowered with enough of an attitude to kill or not kill? For my name is within him. What does that mean? Because my name is within him. Shemi be, letter bet, in the kufresh bet is to draw near. Verse 22, here's the promise. For if, that's a condition, if we, means that we don't have to, we have the option not to. If we shema, hearken, shamar, watch, keep, and guard to his voice, that's his kuf av lamed, kol, or kuf lamed vav, his voice, or it could be spelled either way, kuf lamed is the 2 letters, and carry out, that's the word asha, all that I shall speak. Yahweh speaks, and if we do what Yahweh speaks, then, here's the if then I shall be the enemy of your enemies and persecute your persecutors. Okay, was this only good for back then, or is that good for us now? Goes on to say, verse 23, for my angel shall go before you and bring you to the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Canaanite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. And there's a whole other study of what those names mean, which we'll get into on another day. And I will annihilate them. Yahuwah says, okay, I've set everything up, and I'm just about to annihilate all these different people that live in the land. But then he backed off and didn't annihilate them. He annihilated Israel because Israel didn't believe him and go along with what he said. The reason for us to go back to these words, these letters, these Moedim, these holidays, to regard Passover, the Sabbath day, and eat unleavened bread for a week because he said so, is so that we can play into this promise and have him annihilate those who would like to annihilate us. Hey, Mr. Gates, you're not trying to kill us, are you? You and Mr. Soros, do you have something in mind? You always got something in mind. Maybe you should meet up with him on the road. Verse 24, do not prostrate yourself to their gods. Do not worship them. Do not act according to their practices. Rather, you shall tear them apart and smash their pillars. So we're tearing apart the lives of Sunday, Christmas, and Easter, and Halloween. And we're smashing those pillars of majestic culture, Greco-Roman, Christian, Western Hemisphere. Who knows what's going on in the eastern side of the planet? They've got their task at hand. Verse 25, you shall worship Yahweh Eloheka, and he shall bless your bread and your water. You know, Nestle's trying to commandeer the water and say it's not a human right to have water, that they own it all, and they're going to turn it into a commercial enterprise. They're trying to buy up all the underground aquifers. Nestle Company, Nestle Corporation, Yahweh says he's going to bless and give us the provision of bread and water, and I shall remove illness from your midst. Not from the vaccine, from Yahweh Raphaenu. Yahweh is our healer. This promise that I choose to stand on is that Yahuwah is my Elohim, and he will bless and provide with bread and water and health. If I turn my back on the cultural mandates of wearing a mask and taking vaccines and regarding Christmas, Easter, and Sunday, so I defy those cultural norms because of these verses in Exodus 23. Okay, now how do I do it? Oh, what if I have the wrong day? What if I don't know which day Passover is? If I have a heart to regard Passover, I think that is a big first step. To determine exactly the right calendar is another step. And we don't quite know how to make that step at this point. So I remember Brad Scott once said that he knows of 50 different calendars, and I was talking with Rad Sykes and figured if you look at every permutation, talk about a combination lock, if you look at like every possible combination, there's a couple hundred different calendars. At least we have to put our attitude toward trying to be his people, doing what he said. And the first step out of the gate is to make the separation of what he's talking about and what everybody else is talking about as the culture of the world. That's the picture of the big white fence. I'm going on about this because that's where it all starts. It all starts with, as Kurt had, the picture of the Mishkan. That comes out of Exodus 25, and I believe it's verse 8. I'll look it up here. But that's where Yahweh is speaking to Moshe. Okay, the Exodus 20 is where the 10 commandments were spoken on Mount Sinai. So here's 5 chapters later. It's called Parashat Teruma. Tav Resh Vav Mem He. The tar is the Tav Resh means to search and explore. Resh Vav Mem, Rome, is where we get the word for, as I've said before, Romans, like from Italy, and Romulans, and the word for reem ox. It has to do with great things, the greatest of things. So this parasha called Teruma, it's simply translated a portion. See, the way the parashah say, it's in the first or second verse. Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, that's verse 1. Va'idabar Yahuwah el Moshe la'amer. Sometimes that's not even considered a real verse, but verse 2, Dabar el b'nei Israel vayechoku li teruma. It's translated, take for me a portion. So I know that that word teruma means portion, but the word tav, resh, vav, mem, he is seek the greatest things. I'm just trying to show you the way this translation effort works, this erectology thing. The translators are telling you the portion is teruma. But the idea of seek for the greatest things goes on to say, from every man whose heart motivates him, you shall take my portion. Well, that's the concept of the tithe. Yahweh's portion. He says, go look through all your possessions and find the greatest thing, the best thing, and give it to me. That's teruma. So to search for the greatest thing is the word teruma, but it's just simply translated portion. So to look at it in Hebrew, you realize, oh, that is his portion. I'm just trying to show you that's the way the language is working. It goes on to verse 9 here. Verse 8, they shall make a sanctuary for me so that I may dwell among them. Verse 9, like everything that I show you, the form of the tabernacle and the form of all its vessels, and so you shall do. That word form is spelled tav, bet, nun, yod, tav. If you look that up in the dictionary, it's the word pattern. So is it form or is it pattern? It's tav, bet, nun, yod, tav. Okay, we talked about before how this letter tav is a mark or a sign, and it means stamped or branded. It's actually the word shem, which is name, fame, designation, renown, reputation. So the letter tav literally, like this, is the place, the identity, the intent, it's everything involved with. And the fact that the word pattern is spelled tav, bet, nun, yod, tav, and the word bet, nun, yod literally is translated my son or my children, bene, my children, within the confines of the two letters tav, the first letter and the last letter. So I can read the word simply translated form or pattern and say, my son within the confines of my determination of this is what it means to be my son. And Yeshua, as the model, said, I'm not doing my own thing. I'm not about my own agenda. But what I am doing, I'm saying what I only hear my Father saying, and I'm doing only what I see my Father doing. But that is his agenda. So to go back and say the word ratzon, that means Aleph reshon, which is the word earth, aretz, means I will voluntarily agree as my will, my wish, my desire to do that which is pleasing and acceptable to my Father. That's the word aretz, simply translated earth. And it's exactly the great big idea that Yeshua had, the rest coming out of the bet for the word bereshit, which is our idea to be his Bnei Israel, his children of Israel. Let's just do what he said. Let's confine our desires to be within the terms of his covenant. It's what he said to our forefathers. We could sit here and read it in Exodus 23, and here's it in Exodus 25, and Yeshua was doing the same thing. And Yeshua said, if you don't believe Moshe, you're not going to believe me. He's not saying that he's greater than Moshe or that he's greater than Abraham, though he was, or greater than David. There's other talk about that, but he's saying, listen, he came as an extension, as a branch, as a root. The word is sheresh, shin reshin, which means a branch or root. Or, from what I understand, you could have an olive tree that's absolutely dead, no life in it, not a spark of life, not a molecule moving. Remember, there's structural molecules in 3 dimensions. And then there's this thing about this concept of life. Day 3, seeds put into the earth, which have the potential for life. And then time was made and another dimension operating within life moving. But what is it that makes something alive? I tried to search this out on the internet, and all the scientists can tell us is that the structural molecular configuration of elements, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, it's just like Tinker Toys, like an erector set. They're just there. They're not alive. It's just a structure of molecules, a chemistry model. What makes it come alive? All they know is that if you put earth around it and moisture and sunlight, which is a type of heat, maybe it's more than just heat, but somehow then the amino acids start functioning and the thing comes alive. So you can have a seed that's dead, that's dormant for thousands of years. They can find them in a pyramid and bring them out and they'll come to life. You can have a dead olive tree and somehow one little tendril of its root had moved, even though it's completely dead, maybe a mile away. Maybe even, I forget the exact number that they gave. It was a long way away. And an olive tree will come up and it'll be the exact DNA of that other olive tree, even though that one's dead. And it'll be, 1,000 years later, a couple thousand years later, it's the same olive tree. They'll say it's the exact same DNA. It's a sheresh of that one. So for Yeshua to be a sheresh of David and Moshe, a son of, for us to be B'nai Israel, it's built into the model like the banyan tree. We are Israel. Not a new Israel, we're simply Israel. We're Tabanit. Just like in English, we have the word cabinet. We put a C-A-B, cabinet, like a box made out of wood that you put something in. Well, a tabernacle is the same thing. We are in the terms of the covenant. And I could say also, well, B'nai is the mediator of this Tav and that Tav. When you sign a contract, yes, I swear I will be this, I will take the oath. Yes, I swear I will do this, I will take the oath. Israel and Yahuwah are in oath together for all time. And beyond time. Time is just a mapping of a linear projection locked onto the face of this earth, but he's outside of time. When he says I am, that simply exists. Everything always right now. There is no past, present, future. Yeah. But then what's the fence? So if you read the alphabet as a map, there's 7 letters, Aleph through Zion, and then there's a cutoff, because Zion is the letter that means to cut off, drawn like an axe or a plowshare, which rips open like the Roman flail that ripped open Yeshua's flesh, all part of the pattern. But then chet is a fence. So if you have a moat around a castle, that's like a Zion around a chet. If you have a prison like Alcatraz on an island with sharks in the water, the sharks are the teeth of the Zion, guarding the people that are made prisoners on that island out in San Francisco Bay. You might want to show a picture of that. These pictures of what's going on in the alphabet, for Yeshua to have his flesh ripped open and to be stabbed and pierced, nailed, and his blood drained out and put to death, and a spear in his heart, he was dead. Zion, cut off, just like the Sabbath day, thrown into a tomb, chet, big round rock, tet is something round, rolled in front, and then they had a hole bored through the rock, and a Roman plug of metal, from what I understand, it was inch and a half diameter and foot long, and they pounded in to be this key that locked in the round rock from being able to be opened up. That's the Roman seal. And then a contingent of cohort of soldiers in front of the tomb to make sure it didn't open. That's the Yod. That's the hand holding it shut. There's Yeshua being crucified. And when Pilate said, behold this man that he had put the crown of thorns on and whipped him with the flail and put the Roman robe, the Zion is not just to be killed or to be put to the weapon. It's to be adorned by weapons, which Yeshua was, and is to be distinguished like an officer's hat or a halo or a crown of thorns. All that's also Zion. So for Pilate to say, behold this man, in Latin, ecce homo, in Hebrew, hine et ish, or ishu, I think that's where the word Jesus comes from. Isus is from, it means man, it, man, he, man with the vav suffix, ish, aleph yod shin vav. Behold this man. Well, that's like the letters Hey Vav Zion. If Het Tet Yod is a picture of being put into the grave, and Hey Vav Zion is a picture of being put, this man, Hey points to the, Vav is the number 6 letter man, masculine suffix, being put to the Zion weapon, and Pilate confirmed that. Then he's saying, this man, which man? The one that was predicated by the other 3 letters, Bet Gimel Dalet. Well, that word means to deceive, betray, beguile, to act treacherously, to be camouflaged, cloaked. So to say, well, who's he? He came from Aleph. To come from Aleph in disguise as a man who would be put to death and put into the tomb, that man. Well, now I know this is talking about Yeshua. So for him to resurrect at Zadi after 3 days and 3 nights, I have to figure in 3 days and 3 nights. So you've got this package. You got Het Tet Yod being put into the tomb, like tonight, Passover night, Yeshua was put into the tomb. And then there's a week of unleavened bread, known as Chag HaMatzot, matzah. The word matzah, Mem Zadi Aleph or Mem Zadi Hey, means find out how to do something. But Mem Zadi Vav Tav would be the plural, but Mem Zadi Vav Tav is also pronounced mitzvot, which means command and instruction. How to find out how to do something, command and instruction. Well, who's going to find out? You're not going to read the Torah to find out how to do something unless you want to be this people Israel. Well, who's the people Israel? They're trapped like on Alcatraz. They're in jail of having to be under the law, under the terms of the covenant, which means when Yahweh says, I'm going to persecute your persecutors, I'm going to be an enemy of your enemies, I'm going to be your refuge, your citadel. You're like living on the island of Alcatraz surrounded by sharks so that nobody can mess with you. You're in this high tower like Rapunzel. Oh, I just got to get out of this high tower. Well, there's this word that means high tower, which is related to the word tamra, insurmountably high. Yahweh is saying, I've got you guys protected if you stay in covenant with me, and I will not let your enemies mess with you. I won't allow them to unless you climb out of my high tower or you lay down here like Rapunzel and let the enemy crawl up under terms of, oh, I adore you, but I'm going to now kill you. Thank you, Mr. Gates. Oh, you want to protect us, so you're going to inject us with toxins and poisons to change our DNA so that we are no longer even human as Yahweh made us? Well, thank you very much. No, thank you. I'm not going to let you climb up the high tower. I'm not going to give you a submarine or a boat which you can avoid the sharks. No, may Yahweh's sharks get you. Thank you. For me to choose to be his Israel, it's my choice. He let it be at our choice. So the fenced area is exclusive. And so when you get to Leviticus 23, which is where the Moedim are laid out, verse 1 says, Yahuwah spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the children of Israel. Children of Israel. It isn't the Christians. It isn't the Muslims. It isn't the Americans. It isn't the British or the Indians or the Aztecs. Speak to the children of Israel. So if you're not the children of Israel, then just forget it. It has nothing to do with you. Say to them, Yahuwah's appointed festivals that you are to designate as holy convocations. These are my appointed festivals. For 6 days, labor may be done, and the seventh day is a day of complete rest. I'm just reading stock translation here. A holy convocation, you shall not do any work. It's a Sabbath for Yahweh in all your dwelling places. Then it goes on to verse 4. These are the appointed festivals of Yahuwah, the holy convocations, which you shall designate in their appropriate time. So to designate them in the appropriate time is one step. To be aware of them is another step. To do them is another thing. Verse 5, in the first month, on the 14th of the month, in the afternoon, is the time of the Pesach offering to Yahuwah. And on the 15th day of this month is the festival of matzah to Yahuwah. You shall eat matzahs for a 7-day period. On the first day, there shall be a holy convocation. That's a set-apart meeting, a kadosh, mitzvah kadosh. We can get into every one of these words and what they mean, but just reading this in English for the moment. You shall not do laborious work. You shall bring a fire offering to Yahweh for a 7-day period. On the 7th day shall be a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. Then in verse 9, Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, see the way it starts? In verse 1, Yahuwah spoke to Moshe saying, and now here verse 9, Yahuwah spoke to Moshe saying, and it seems like every time he starts a new phrase, verse 23, Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, verse 26, Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, verse 33, Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, so what I noticed is that every time he does that, it sets up the next Moed. That's why I regard Shavuot is a 50-day one festival for 50 days, because it's broken up by Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, and here's where Pesach, the afternoon and evening on the 14th, is coupled with the week of unleavened bread. That's why you have some people saying that this is the week of Passover, or this is the festival of unleavened bread, as if Passover and unleavened bread were hooked together. It's because of this in Leviticus 23. These are Yahweh's appointed festivals. But if you look at what it says in Hebrew, it's mem, vav, ayin, dalet, yod. There's no mem. It's not a plural. It's moedi. And if you look at the word edi, ayin, dalet, yod, because the mem is the prefix letter, means the place or the object or the one who. Ayin, dalet, yod means choice, best, treasure, to be bejeweled, ornamented, adorned. This is his best stuff by which he has ornamented himself. And the word ayin dalet means witness and testimony. His heart, his face, his attitude, everything about him is found in this place. And for the church to say we will have nothing to do with that, okay, it's they who moved, not Yahweh. This is his stuff that he gives to the children of Israel. And when it says Mikra Kodesh, it's translated here, holy convocation. Michael Rood calls them set-apart rehearsals. But the word Mem Kuf Resh Aleph Yod, Mikra Kodesh, well, the word Kodesh is translated as holy, sacred, set apart. It's also the word betrothed. In truth, betrothed means in truth. Sacred, in truth, sworn vow. Only for this one, only for Israel, only for Yahuwah, no other deity, no other God, no other vow, no other reference to anybody or anything. Makra, Mem, Kuf Resh Aleph. And then you look up the word Kuf Resh Aleph and it means learn how to read the scripture in Hebrew. The Makra then would be the time, the place, the opportunity, the occasion. Makra also means a sacred assembly, gather together. So Mikra Kodesh, literally translated holy convocation, can be read, gather together as a sacred event to learn how to read the scripture. It's what we're doing right now. Aleph Lamed Hey, that means these are my appointed festivals. Allah Ham Moedi. But we can also read, as I said before, Aleph Lamed Hey, and the word Elohim in Genesis 1:1 means these. Okay, that's the way it's translated here, but it also means an object of reference. But if we don't even regard them, then they're no object of reference. But that word also means take on oath. To take on the Moedim is to swear an oath, a vow of allegiance to the one they reference, which is Yod He Vav He, the Elohim of Israel. To keep the festivals is not a party to see what the Jews do by cultural tradition. To keep the Passover is to swear a vow of allegiance, of being Yahuwah's Kadoshi, his betrothed. But if you break the vow, this word Allah also means cursed, wail, and lament. If you break the vow of allegiance of being Yahuwah's Kadoshi, or as it says in Daniel 9, the Elyonim Kadoshim, to be the sacred of the Most High, it's to be a betrayer, to not keep these things, or to not regard these things, or to not even know about these things, and yet think you're his. And then you get that horrible, the most horrible of all parables, where Yeshua says there's 10 bridesmaids and 5 have no shemen. And we can read that shemen means oil, but it also means know the value of his stuff, his memnoon. Shemen is where you get the word for semen, which carries the DNA of the Father. This is his DNA. This is his Ayin Dalet. In these Moedim is the shemen of our dear, most gracious Heavenly Father. And we don't recognize him. We don't know him because the Christian church said we'll have nothing to do with these detestable practices of the Jews. The big white fence is to choose life. Moshe said in Deuteronomy 6, I put before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Your choice. I encourage you, Moshe said, I implore you, choose life. Nobody can make you keep the festivals. To choose life. For Yeshua to choose to be put to death and go to the grave, because only then could he Zadi resurrect. He did it on purpose to run a certain course, an obstacle course, which included to have a crown of thorns jammed on his head, to be put to the Roman weapon, to be put to death, pierced and flogged, and to be put into the grave dead for 3 days and 3 nights, just like a parable of Jonah, so that he could be risen back up out of the grave. The picture of the letter Zodi, which is not in the Greek language because that's the key of obfuscation. Yahweh used the Greek language and then the Latin and then the English to hide the resurrection.